Hello and welcome to this part of the GAMS Introductory video series. This time we will talk about interactive web applications with GAMS Miro, again based on our vintage cars and trucks model. You'll notice that the title is the same as on the previous video. The difference now is that we decided to shoot an update regarding configuring and using of the new GAMS Miro release version versus the GAMS Miro pre-release version, which was subject to the old video. And you will see that there were quite substantial changes made to the user interface and user friendliness in terms of developing such a GAMS Miro application. The components we will cover will again consist of sets, scalars and parameters. We'll introduce a dollar control option, or actually several dollar control options to interface the GAMS part with the GAMS Miro part. And the concepts we will cover will be reporting and web development using GAMS Miro. GAMS Miro is an interactive web application framework for GAMS models. GAMS Miro, in case you are wondering, stands for Model Interface with Rapid Orchestration, provided by GAMS. GAMS Miro can be downloaded from the GAMS website. The subsite is gams.com/Miro. The download page is listed here on this slide, and also at the bottom the Getting Started guide. And I highly recommend to read the Getting Started guide because it contains crucial information about how to connect actually GAMS and GAMS Miro in terms of paths of executables, encoding of your GAMS file, etc. But now let's just jump in and open up GAMS Studio and see our model. So what we are looking at right now is our vintage car model from the second video. Note that we do have a set V for the vehicle types, cars and trucks. We have certain input values to the optimization. We have the vehicle cost and this vehicle selling price as two parameters defined over the set V. And we have two scalars, our available spending budget and the number of spaces in the barn. Then we have the integer variables x, counting the number of vehicles, the free variable z for the value of the objective function, our two constraints, the budget constraint and the number of spots or spaces in the barn constraint. We have an upper bound of the variable x pertaining to trucks of 2 because we have two large spaces. We do have then the solve statement and display of the solution. So starting from this, we will introduce so-called dollar control options, or I call them compiler directives most of the time, that tell GAMS which data shall be interfaced to GAMS Miro. And we start top down what we would like to exchange between GAMS, the model, and the GAMS Miro so-called user interface or front end. And we start with the constants. We would like to set the values of the constants from within GAMS Miro. So the control options for this is on external input, basically enabling external input of the values for these parameters and scalars, and accordingly the off switch of external input. And this tells GAMS basically that whatever declarations are between on and off external input, those declarations are used for external data input, external meaning from within GAMS Miro. And in a similar fashion, we will define what is output of the model to GAMS Miro and shall be displayed within GAMS Miro. And in our first shot, we will change this later. These will be the values of the integer variables x and the value of the objective function capturing our revenue. And we have again an on-off pair on external output and accordingly $off external output. Like this. And this is basically everything we need for a very bare bones Miro application, a Miro run. Note that in the newer versions of GAMS Studio there's a Miro entry up here in the menu, which provides this interface between the GAMS Studio and GAMS Miro, and if everything is set up correctly and all the paths are in order, there are certain entries here pertaining to running GAMS Miro. And in our simplest case, we'll just select Run Base Mode and then GAMS Miro will fire up and we will see what's happening. Let's do this. You see a couple of messages here on the right-hand side. And after a while, GAMS Miro will be open and will show us basically the input data to the model. Oops, it's open on the other screen, so let's just move it here. So this is like now our GAMS Miro. Not very much on the screen right now. yet. We do see the input tab is active. The input tab has the vehicle cost, the selling price, and the scalars. These are exactly the data elements that are between on and off external input, and there are no data in there. And we did have in the GAMS model, if I just move the window away real quick and we have a peek at the GAMS model, we did have like hard-coded data assigned at compile time. And this is actually recognized by GAMS Miro, and GAMS Miro writes this in its own database in the so-called default scenario. So let's go ahead and load this default scenario by clicking Load Data here. And it offers me immediately the default scenario. I'll say Import, and it imports the data, whatever is assigned at compile time in the GAMS model. So our spending budget is like $3.6 thousand. Spaces in the barn, number of vehicle spaces is 4. This is the scalar tab here. Selling price of the vehicle was a parameter. For cars it's 2, for trucks it's 2,500. Vehicle cost for buying the racks is like 1,000 and 1,200 for the trucks. So we do have like our input data. We can go ahead now and change this. So instead of 1, we could just say 1.5, for instance, here, and then run our model with our changed values, which is quite comfortable, but let's just switch it back to 1 to really run the data exactly as it is defined in the GAMS model. Then we click on Solve Model, and Solve Model basically invokes the one. You see the listing file and the log file, and we are thrown basically into the output part of GAMS Miro, where we see this pivot table-like structure. We haven't defined anything pertaining to formatting, so that's the default format as GAMS Miro displays it. So the output is basically number of vehicles and then the value of the objective function. This was exactly, if I just move this away real quick, what was between here these on and off external output statements. Integer variables x or v and free variables z or z. So here we look at the number of vehicles variable. For cars, the optimal solution was 1. For trucks, it was 2. Note that if we have variables in between the on and off external output, we do get all the attributes of the variable, the level attribute, lower, marginal, scale, and upper attributes, which you may or may not want to see. And up here you can switch between the number of vehicles and then the scalar valued variables, which is just the value of the objective functions z, and we get like this level value of $7,000 maximum revenue. And you can go ahead, if you just go back to the number of vehicles, for instance, and play a little bit here with this drag and drop functionality with the arrangement of the data. So you could probably also put the header in there, and for the header you could select that you only want to see the level value. You don't care about the other attributes, and here then you have your cars and trucks displayed. So this is basically the bare bones Miro application already. What we do want to implement now, though, is we want to have it a little bit nicer. So first of all, we would like to have a nicer display of the result, ideally like a pie chart like showing at the first glance like how many cars, how many trucks we have. We would like to have not only probably the revenue, the level value attribute of the variable z, but also the total profit, for instance, and we will implement a parameter like a scalar that captures this. And in terms of data input, if I just switch back here to the input part real quick, probably it would be nice for the scalars to have something like a slider for the budget, where we could graphically like slide back and forth and determine like our available budget, and probably like a pull down menu to select how many spaces in the barn we have if we want to evaluate other scenarios than the scenario which is hard coded in the GAMS model. And this is exactly what we will do next. We will go back to our GAMS model, introduce some reporting functionality, and then run GAMS Miro again after we configured GAMS Miro and take advantage of the advanced capabilities there. So let's close out of GAMS Miro here. Now we are back in our model, and let's see what we wanted to change. We did not want to change anything with the input. So in principle, these are our input quantities, and it's basically then up to us to configure GAMS Miro in a way that the input is like dealt with the way we want to deal with it, in terms of sliders and pull downs and so on. And the output, well, probably it was not that great of an idea to have like all the attributes, especially for the free variable z, the value of the objective function, since something like the marginal value of the objective function doesn't tell you much. So let's just move this off external output up there so that only the integer variables are now part of it. And let's scroll to the end of the model and just do away with our display commands because we don't care about them right now, and introduce some reporting. And let's introduce like two scalars. Let's call one scalar revenue, and the other scalar we call, let's say, profit. And the explanation text is the same as the name of the scalar. And well, we want to output that, right? So because we want to output that, we need to embrace it by this on external output and off external output pair. $off external output. And now we need to calculate the values of that. Revenue is just whatever the value of the objective function is, so it's just z and the level attribute of the variable z. What's the profit? Well, profit is revenue less cost, right? So it's revenue less what we spend. What do we spend? In the previous video, I used the budget equation and the level value of the budget equation for whatever we spend, because the level value of an equation refers to the left-hand side of the equation. The left-hand side is the side that just the terms with the variables in it, which is just the sum. And yeah, let's this time do it differently. Let's take the sum, copy-paste the sum here. We sum over all elements of the set V, and we sum the level value of our number of cars, variable times the cost of the cars. So this is pretty much it. So that's basically the prescription, how to come up with revenue and profit. So what did we change? We left the input as it is. We changed the output to be like twofold. One part contains just the variables. Note that we also will keep all the attributes of the variables. And the second part will be scalars, can also be parameters if you have like more sophisticated reporting, that take the values of the revenue and the profit. All right. And now I said we want to configure GAMS Miro, right? And last time we had like this thing with the JSON files and upload and download or editing them. Now with the release version of GAMS Miro, things got way easier. In the Miro menu, you can invoke Miro in the so-called configuration mode. So let's go ahead and do this and run Miro in the configuration mode, where it again collects all the information of the GAMS model and then opens up the Miro screen in configuration mode. It's again on the other screen. Let's move it up here. And this is how Miro looks in configuration mode. There's a multitude of settings you can set, and I do refer you to the documentation of the GAMS Miro website to figure out what these settings are, and we will just set those that are relevant for what we would like to achieve in our minimum application. So here on the left we have again these little tabs or menu entries, and we will just skip the general settings and jump into the configure tables. We do not really want to have anything in the configure tables either, and move on to configure so-called widgets. And widgets is exactly the entry we are looking for coming up with our sliders and pull downs for the data entry. If we select widgets, we see immediately we have three tabs here: new GAMS option, where you can set options to GAMS, double dash parameters for the GAMS call, and we are interested though in the symbols. And what symbols are available is here in this pull down menu in terms of input symbols, spending budget, and number of vehicle spaces. So let's start with the spending budget. Here we can select which type of widget you want, and in this case we will stick with the slider. It will be different for the next one. And here's a preview of how the widget will look like. So here we have like a minimal slider. Then we can choose a label for the slider. So let's say it shall be called spending budget. You see immediately here the preview updates. The minimum value, let's leave it at 0. The maximum value, what did we have? We had $3.6 kilodollars in our model. Let's say we can, I don't know, pump it up to 5. Let's see, note that the 5 here now is the maximum value. This default value, let's keep it at 3.6, same as in the model. Does not update to 3.6 because we have a step which is not set yet. And the step size, let's say we can increment it in $100 increments. So 0.1 would be the increment, 3.6 right here is the step size. All right, just see if I missed anything out. No. Let's show tick marks, and it just makes the scale more readable. Don't forget, whenever you set something here in the widget configuration, before switching to a different symbol, save. Always save, otherwise you lose your changes. So we save this one, and we will just move on to the next input symbol, the number of vehicle spaces. Remember that 4 was our value in the model. We will select now a drop-down menu, and let's say the drop-down menu shall be called, well, again, number of vehicle spaces. And what choices can we choose from? Well, let's say a pathological value. 0 shall be possible. You can either add, click now and add 0, or just hit the comma key, and then you say, okay, let's say we have up to 4 spaces, and let's say we can like have 1 additional space. So we just do the value 0 to 5, and here you will see how this drop-down menu will look like. All right, don't forget to save. And these are now our input widgets for these 2 symbols. All right, then next entry on the left-hand side is configure graphs. So let's just go ahead and click on the configure graphs. For the graphs, and especially for the preview, what Miro wants to do is it wants to load some default data from the database, which pertains to like the actual optimization model. So let's import again the default data. And now it has the default data. It already suggests pie charts for some quantities. And let's have a look what we actually want to define here. We want to have a look at the output symbols, right? So if we have 2 entries here in the output symbols, we have the number of vehicles, which is the X variable. Remember, it has these attributes. And we want to display, the level attribute. The label shall be vehicle types. You can optionally, I don't know, have like a donut hole here, but probably that's not really absolutely necessary. Oops, why doesn't it work? So we can change this a little bit, but just do a 0 here. And that's the main entries, the general entries, title of the chart, let's say number of vehicles. What we can also do is show graphic and table data split in screen, so we will look at both actually the graphics and the table at the same time, which is a nice feature, so we just activate that. Don't forget to hit save before moving on to the next element, which is the scalars, the output scalars. And the output scalars, there's not so much of a choice. Basically, we only can have like a value box for them, and just like save this one too. And we overwrite the data. I just hit save twice, that's why it's asking me. All right, so let's assume everything worked, and quit out of the configuration mode and start up Miro in the base mode again and see the effect of our configurations. Once we did this, Miro starts up. I'm afraid it will be on the other screen again. Yes, it is on the other screen. I'll move it up. And so far we don't really see so much change. We see like this load data flashing because we haven't loaded any data from the base case. But even before we load the data, we can just have a quick inspection of the tabs, and in the input widgets, we actually see our input widgets already with our default value. So after we click on load data and select default, you see data is populated in the vehicle cost, 1 and 1.2, selling price 2 and 2.5, and the input widgets have the spending budget, which we can still change in like a graphical way, and also the number of spaces we can select between 0 and 5. All right, so let's solve the model. Click on solve. You see again the solve status, and in the output we see the number of vehicles now displayed as a pie chart. So we have 2 trucks and 1 car, and we also have a table. Note that in the table we do have all the variable attributes because we chose to leave the on-off external output around the variable declarations. So both have like a level value, a marginal value, and so on. the output scalars, we see now revenue of 7 and profit of 3.6. So this is basically then exactly the expected output based on our configuration. One last thing, there's a possibility to compare scenarios here, which is a very nice functionality of GAMS Miro. So let's go ahead and save the scenario, which is like the default scenario, and go back to the input and do some adjustments. Let's say we have not $3,600, but let's say $4,300 spending budget. Let's say we don't have 4 spaces, but 5 spaces and still 2 spaces for the trucks. And let's solve the model again. Then it comes up with some different results. So 8.5 revenue, which is increased, and 4.3 profit. And that's the number of vehicles. So we have now 3 cars and 1 truck. All right. Now what GAMS Miro allows us to do is, so if we just like say save as, and we don't save it as a default, but we save it as scenario 1 and save it. Then we can click on compare scenarios, and let's say we load the default scenario on the left hand side, and on the right hand side we load the scenario 1, and then we can compare them side by side, and at the first glance actually see what the respective differences are in terms of number of cars and number of trucks, in terms of the scalars, in terms of the spending budget and the number of vehicle spaces as the input, in terms of the output scalars, the revenue and the profit difference. So that's a very powerful feature, and you can also compare like more than 2 scenarios, not side by side, however, but you can switch to tab view, and you can, in the tabs, basically load different scenarios and compare the scenarios to the default, for instance. So that's quite a powerful way of doing that. All right, and this is basically what I wanted to tell you about quickly assembling a very quick Miro application based on an existing GAMS model with only minimal changes in the model itself. So if you look back into the model, the changes are basically just this on-off external inputs and output statements, and it involves some configuration on the Miro part if you're not happy with the default setting of the Miro elements. This concludes the coding part of this video. So this was a quick run through GAMS Miro. Of course, we only were able to scratch on the surface of GAMS Miro's capabilities given the limited time of this video. Note that there are many more GAMS Miro features, ranging from the so-called hypercube mode, where you can evaluate many scenarios and then submit also many scenarios at the same time, and are talking about thousands of scenarios, and then analyze the results accordingly. Other features include packaging your application as a standalone application that you actually can package, put into GAMS Miro, and give it to your users and customers. So for more information, please refer to the website gams.com/Miro, and why not also have a look at the GAMS Miro webinar here on the GAMS Lessons YouTube channel. So thank you very much for your attention, for watching this video. In case you have the need for any more information about GAMS Miro, GAMS software in general, GAMS services, training and consulting, please don't hesitate to contact either GAMS or myself. I got part of SDP Science Driven Business Ltd a couple of months ago, and we offer GAMS advisory services, scientific computing, by delivering expert advice, GAMS coaching and consulting services. So thanks once more, and enjoy GAMS.